Hello. On today's episode of Transmission, I'm speaking with Ali, CEO at TerraVerde Energy. For more than 15 years, Ali and his team have been helping California's public agencies like schools and water districts, city governments, to take control of their energy future with microgrids and solar and now batteries. And we cover why actually the biggest barrier for batteries and solar isn't tax credits and incentives anymore. It's actually the interconnection queue that leaves projects stranded. Personally, I love Ali's optimism. If you're in energy finance or grid resilience, you're going to love this episode, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Ali, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get stuck into it. TerraVerde, what do you guys do and what's the problem that you solve?
We are a leading energy advisor to public agencies in California. We help them deploy and operate microgrids, if you want to call them that by and large, to help them navigate the rising cost of electricity and the aging infrastructure, grid infrastructure in California that often hinders them from operating their essential and critical services. We largely serve public agencies in the state, so school districts, city governments, water, wastewater agencies, and organizations that are essentially permanent operators in the state. And our job is to help them navigate their energy needs.
Let's go back to 2009. So you've been doing this for over a decade, and interested to know what was the gap that you saw back in 2009 that got you on this journey doing TerraVerde?
That's a good question. So I'll go a little bit before that and I'll jump forward. I'm an engineer by training. I started my career in Canadian oil sands. Great work, loved it. In 2009, I decided to transition into renewables. Through networking, I got connected to a solar startup in Houston, of all places. Got my feet wet, as they say, on getting into the solar industry. What transitioned and transpired into TerraVerde was the gap that we saw in the market when commercial solar, back then we used to call it DG, distributed generation, was about to take off. There were incentives coming into California for deploying on-site solar, behind-the-meter solar. And we saw a gap in how, by and large, school districts in California had in terms of procuring solar on their properties. And it was early days, wild, wild west. Everybody was dangling the shiniest thing to, these school districts. And these school districts did not have a way to unpack and identify what is the right thing for them to do. How much solar do they need? Where do they need them? How does it save them money? Which panels should they buy? So we set out with a very small mission and focused mission of help schools go solar. That was really our tagline. Help schools go solar. And from there, everything grew. Solar technology grew, technologies around solar grew, batteries came into equations, generators, EV chargers, and more people adopted solar, and they needed help to essentially levelize the playing field between buyers of solar and sellers of solar. And that's what we set out to create. And 15 years later, we're still lucky enough to be able to serve.
And where's the company at now? So how many people are there in the company? How many customers do you serve? Can you just give us the baseball card? And then I want to ask you about some controversial statements about interconnection queues, but we'll get to that in a second. Tell us about the company.
Yeah, so the company has been steadily growing. We currently serve 170 clients in California. By and large, our focus is on public sector, so school districts, city governments, and water, wastewater agencies. And we really focus on these customer groups for us because they essentially provide either an essential service or call it critical infrastructure, right? Like you gotta educate students and the next generation of people in this country, in the state. That's the job of school districts. They are here to forever serve California. City governments, water, wastewater facilities, without them, society would die, right? Like we will not have cities if we did not have a water agency creating clean drinking water. We would not survive if a sanitation agency was not here to clean up waste from our cities. So they are critical infrastructure. And so we stay focused on serving them. We are involved in the community, and we try to level up, grow as they grow. And their needs, their businesses have evolved. Both of these groups have different needs in terms of what they need their buildings, their facilities to do. And no matter where you go in life, you need energy, you need electricity. And with the trend to electrify everything, the need for electricity and power generation is ever more critical now.
And so building for that customer profile then, so essential services, schools, sanitation systems, that kind of stuff. How does that change the way that you go to market? How does that change the way that you build and design these systems?
That's a good question. So this is a little bit of a niche view into the world that we have, as informed by the needs of our customers, that differentiates how a solar project, or nowadays we use the word microgrid because you have to do more than solar in order to create value, can provide value to a water agency, for example. So if you take that as an example, these agencies operate critical infrastructure. They can't go offline. They need backup power. Every water agency, every wastewater agency has a diesel generator installed at their site to have backup power support, which is more and more needed as more and more power outages are happening in California. Aging infrastructure, plus the threat of wildfire causing the utilities to shut down power lines to prevent fires from spreading during high wind events. These operators, and again, staying focused on the water side, they have their own customers to serve. They sell clean water to homes, businesses in their territory, or they provide and collect sewer and treat that and recycle that for reinjection to the ground. And that is a critical service that cannot be stopped and has to go on. We have this saying that every molecule of water requires an electron to go along with it. So demand for electricity is a critical part of their business. And when you look through the business of a water agency through the lens of their CEO, typically they're called a general manager of a water agency, there are three areas that are very important for them. There is rates, like how much do they charge their customers for their product, which is, pure water, clean water, or waste cleanup. There is the regulatory, and there's state requirements for the quality of drinking water and that they serve and essentially provide to their territory. And then there is resiliency, and reliability, being able to actually operate this plant 24/7 without hiccups. At the intersection of these three R's, rates, regulation, resiliency, energy infrastructure plays a critical role. So for example, as it relates to rate reduction, so operating your business so your cost of your water service is the lowest, and having resiliency, redundancy, a battery co-located with their diesel generator is a great solution. It does both. A battery enables you to do rate arbitrage, demand response, peak shaving. That saves you money on an ongoing basis during blue sky events. And then during an outage, the battery is the first grid forming technology, kicks in. And if the outage is longer than, say, 4 or 8 hours, then the diesel generator comes in. So you avoid having diesel emissions because you got a battery. Pair on top of that solar generation, you get a lot more cheaper electricity to avoid and arbitrage the grid and do more of that level of economic benefit that can help them reduce their rates and give them even more resiliency, because now with solar, you can generate during an outage as well and extend the life of your essentially outage support. Because of all of these combinations and the fact that our customers essentially need electricity, they really have two choices in front of them. Do they outsource their electricity and buy it from the grid and put up with the grid and the rising cost of electricity in California, which we'll get to, and the challenges of operating with the grid with more outages? Or do they insource it and buy the equipment and put it onto their plants and operate their own microgrid and become self-reliant? And our customers, by and large, because they have a product that is, in this case, it's water agencies selling water, their cost of electricity gets baked into their rates that they sell to their customers, right? not much different than a data center, where what they sell, right, is like data services, but cost of electricity and infrastructure is their cost to operate, right? It's a cost of goods sold, essentially. So they are inherently buyers of solar and battery and microgrids, versus many other buildings and solutions that are out there being sold to folks, which the buyers of those projects are essentially tax credit buyers because they want to deploy solar and get the tax credits. Sometimes the two match up and there's a good solution, but the initiation of who needs what and why is solar being deployed is very nuanced. And we take the side of, let's create the environment through which solar is bought, not just sold.
Quick break. If you listen to this show, then you probably work in energy. And at Modo Energy, we're not just talking about the energy transition. We help our users to actually make it happen. All energy storage, solar and wind assets on the global balance sheet need to be valued and benchmarked. And that's where Modo Energy comes in. Our benchmarks and forecasts are transparent, bankable, and trusted by the world's leading banks, asset managers, utilities, and developers. So if you want to learn more, go to modoenergy.com. And if you want more content like this, sign up to our weekly dispatch newsletter. Enjoy the conversation. So you've spent a lot of time thinking about interconnection challenges in California. I'm smiling because I'm going to bring up a bit of a contentious statement, which is that you think that interconnection queues are holding up more than even the tax credit uncertainty that we have at the moment, which is a big statement. So what's going on with interconnection queues in California?
Yeah, interconnection queues, there's a problem of that in California. Also, all the other states have their own version of it. I'm more educated in California because that's where my focus is. Given the relevance impact of them to projects getting done compared to tax credits or incentives in general. The two threats here to make a note of is it requires us to zoom out, right? To figure out why are the impacts of interconnection versus tax credits or incentives impacting project development. Look, tax credits getting introduced to the solar industry by and large from 15, 20 years ago was a must-have. It was what we needed to convince and make a compelling case to capital to invest behind this brand new technology that was viewed to be a high-risk technology, right? I remember when I left oil sands and to join solar, my manager at the time told me, "Oh, you're joining the bleeding edge. Be careful because they might just disappear and be nothing." And yeah, in 2009, maybe it was. Maybe we weren't so sure that it was gonna actually be a thing. It was a gamble, but that was the prevailing view back then. And tax credits, were very much a great vehicle to help us get here. And over the years, as development went on and solar industry became more mature and we got our processes down, there was always a desire, even within the industry, those that were in it, that, look, we need to wind down these tax credits and we need to have essentially a gliding path to get off from 30% down to zero. And in fact, we did that. We were on a path years ago to go down from 30%, went as low as 26, I believe, before Inflation Reduction Act came in and reset everything. And now with the HR1, it's like back around. It's like we keep getting tossed around. These incentives, when they come and go, they do create misaligned value creation opportunities where the value is less about somebody who needs solar. I can create some benefit with it for themselves, to buy solar to do it. And it's more comes from the industry trying to sell it in order to maximize on tax credits. If we zoom out and look to the future, at some point we will not need tax credits, and maybe we already would have reached this point in time if we had winded down already. Look, when I started in solar in 2009, $3 for panels were, like it was a thing. Like that's how much you spend on it, right?
For our audience, how much is a panel today then?
It's like 30 cents now, right? 30 cents a watt versus like $3 a watt, right? That's a level of cost reduction we have experienced. And solar panels are not the only cost of a solar project. Yes, we all know this, but We needed incentives when this was immature. We probably don't need them now or forever. So getting off of those incentives is the right thing to do. And the industry as a whole, we need to transition from, incentive-led deployment to a post-incentive era, to an era where people are buying it because it makes sense to do it. Now, fast forward to today, 15 years ago, doing a project in California, it was expensive, technology was new, people had doubts, incentives helped us make the case that, look, take the risk, these incentives help, you recover your money within a few years, and if the asset works, you'll get the benefits for 20 years. So you could de-risk projects with these incentives, and interconnection was not a problem. Like, we could actually plan ahead and say, if you spend these monies against this project schedule, you can go and deploy this infrastructure down the line. Fast forward to today, filing an interconnection and getting the permission to connect to the grid, especially for microgrid, where we need to have backup power, we need to, in addition to getting a permission to operate, you got to do a pre-parallel inspection. These things have been taking such a long time that I refer to them as the interconnection wildcard. You don't know upfront how much the utility is going to charge you for doing any and all upgrades on their side that they need to safely interconnect you to the grid. And two, we really don't know how long it's going to take. So you put this guesstimate of, we think we will be in the interconnection queue for this long and how long it's going to take to actually get it done. And when it comes to project deployment, time is the enemy of all projects. If you don't know how long you're going to be in that project, you can't plan against it. You can't resource load it. You can't set expectations. And when you're doing infrastructure, where you're inside someone's backyard, putting solar battery on their property, it becomes a very difficult challenge to coordinate all these efforts when you can't get a sense of this other third party that who knows when it'll get back to you. So if I could choose, in a world where I have no incentives, but I had clarity on interconnection, I would choose that world.
So you're a free market guy?
I think that question is tough to answer. I don't think there's such a thing as a pure free market, but clarity is, I think, a right that we need to have. Clarity on, even if the government is providing incentives, which by government I mean us putting our money, our collective tax revenue to go to a program to take a stance on something. And look, taking a stance on promoting solar batteries, technologies that give us, reliability, resilience, and they're clean. That's a stance we should take. And as a society, we'll vote for it. I have voted for it. That's totally fine. Collectivism to promote a stance of the society is good. Lack of clarity is not. And whether it's coming from the government because they can't, decide one party or another, they're politicizing solar or whatever technology is of the topic of the day, that doesn't help us build. Whether the lack of clarity is coming from the utilities because they're struggling to resource staff on their side for planning, interconnection engineers, and they're overworked and they can't give us clarity on when can you interconnect, that doesn't help.
So let's switch lanes then for a second. I want to talk about methane. So
yes,
you've described methane as a flow versus stock problem, which is a phrase I recognize from, there's a popular model, stock versus flow model, I think, or stock. How do I get this
flow,
right?
Yeah.
Stock to flow model, which is used in Bitcoin valuations, right? Or valuation forecasts. But it's been a long time since I've looked at anything like that. So what's all this about then?
Yeah, I'll unpack that. So first thing, I can't take credit for the term stock flow ratio, either for Bitcoin or as a pure abstract concept, or as it relates to methane. I wrote about this on my company's blog, TerraVerde, and I referenced it to, I think it was on an episode of Shift Key podcast with Dr. Jenkins. And I think he referred to it in that term, or he was quoting somebody who was referring to it in that regard. And the notion is this, that when it comes to climate change or particularly temperature rise, atmospheric temperature rise, we should care a lot about methane. CO2, carbon is what most people talk about. and it's understood. But methane is actually the more impactful of the gases. I'm going to try and get this right, but the impact of methane for the long-term temperature rise is something like 84 times more harmful than CO2 on a molecule by molecule basis. People should Google this. This is a well-researched topic. Don't take me as my word, but it's somewhere along those numbers. And basically what I think Dr. Jenkins was raising, which is right, is, if we care about how fast does the temperature rise, we should care about how much methane we store up in the atmosphere and how fast do we add more to it. And when you distill it down, you arrive at this, essentially solution with what do we do with methane that gets emitted from all of our human activity, right? A bunch of methane comes from essentially wetlands. I don't know there's much we can do about it. But a good chunk of it comes from the energy industry, like oil and gas drilling, and also, waste management, right? Farming and waste management essentially produces a lot of methane, so it's human-induced activities. And really the best thing you can do with methane, if you care about near-term temperature rise in the atmosphere, is to burn it as efficiently and as cleanly and as completely as you can. I know it sounds weird to be burning stuff, but it's better to release CO2 than methane to the atmosphere. And when you accept that and understand it, and you get past the notion of, oh my God, we're burning something, flames, that's not renewable, then you kind of actually understand that, oh yeah, this is a net negative thing to do in terms of temperature rise and contribution to global warming. And then you start to drill down to, okay, where is methane coming from and how do we address it? And yeah, the notion of, since you mentioned Bitcoin miners, one of the early adopters of figuring out how to actually combat both wasted energy and climate change were Bitcoin miners. They figured out that landfills have a lot of methane that they emit to the atmosphere. Landfills are far away from, places where you have people, so there's no interconnection to the grid. So the notion of, burning the methane to create steam, to turn a turbine to generate power to deliver it doesn't make sense. Let's just put a Bitcoin miner with a generator there and burn the methane, produce electricity, mine Bitcoin, we'll make money, and we're helping the planet. Like that, landfill gas mining is a huge sector, and companies that are doing well now and got started there, like Crusoe AI, Crusoe Energy, did extremely well in 2016, 2017, 2018. And that was a big part of their business to get into the AI data center. They started with Bitcoin mining, and they were one of the first ones to get to the landfill methane gas utilization. That same thread exists within my client group, which is wastewater sanitation agencies. And one of the byproduct of waste management is methane gas. And a lot of these agencies, many of them, in California, have either a flare stack where they use that to burn the methane, or they try to capture that to do cogeneration in a combined heat and power solution, which is great. However, the emissions from those combustions are now falling outside of the regulated numbers in California, as set by the Air Resources Board. So what we now have is a struggle of, we have all of this methane that's coming out of these wastewater plants in California. And if we utilize them for power generation, we could have a combination of a generator plus a battery, maybe solar if there's space, to create what we call a methane-powered microgrid. Unfortunately, there are solutions that are coming to market that are allowing us now to burn methane even more cleanly than with a typical recip engine. Linear generators are now coming to market, and they've been rolled out, and they're allowing you to essentially do methane combustion. It does require some treatment, but have an emission that is much below the required levels in terms of particulate matter. And I think we now have this new tool in our tool stack of combining linear generators, batteries, solar, to help tap into this underutilized gas that we have in our wastewater plants and create bigger microgrids and keep going on this journey of self-generation for self-consumption.
Very cool. Very cool. So in this conversation, we've been very California focused, and let's stay on that. So if you had the ear of the Californian policymakers and you could change something about the regulatory environment that's really getting in the way, what would that be?
Oh man, there's a few things that come to mind. I mean, California is, you can say a lot of good, a lot of bad about it, and people do. I'll just share my view and my feelings towards California, and we'll sort of drill down from there so the context is clear. Having been doing this business for 15 years in California, working with the public agencies in the state, like our mission of helping enable an abundant California is very much one of those moonshot type missions that I believe in. I believe in the value of it, and I believe in working with these critical infrastructure, essential services agencies to help enable. Working with regulators in California, in a state that the power markets are regulated heavily. In fact, people say we are re-regulated because we had regulation, we eased off, then we regulated again, is the name of the game. It's the rule of this geography. And I'm not the type to say, oh, we should just be done with all regulation and let us do whatever we want. I don't follow that camp. But I do believe we need to get to a place where the metrics, the results of what regulations are enabling needs to be accounted for. And those KPIs need to be more transparent to the regulators that are involved in shaping the future of the state. I can share some slides and or we can just refer it to the audience to go pull up. But if you look at the map of the contiguous United States, the 50 states, and look at the energy cost at each of these states, California stands out, and the border of California stands out as triple the cost of average other states. And if you really think about it, between California and Nevada, there's a nice clean border. Geographically, climate-wise, land-wise, there is not a whole lot of difference between a mile this side of the border and a mile that side of the border. So why is it that the electricity cost is so much higher on this side versus that side? That has to do with how we regulate ourselves in California. And this isn't a position issue of today. This is a trend issue of you zoom out, especially since pre-COVID era, 2019, up to 2025. Almost everyone's electricity bill, nominally dollar spent on electricity to operate any building, has doubled. And this isn't, just in the look at the rates and look at this and that. It's like, look at the dollars, you look at the bills, right? Like we do counterfactual bills for all of our customers, and I have the data that goes back, and the same plant producing the same output, its bills have doubled. And you look at where we are today in California, the fact that we put the cost for wildfire mitigation into the electricity rates and not tax-based will increase the cost of electricity going forward. The fact that our utilities, which are regulated, have submitted what's called in California a general rate case, where for the next 3 years, each of these utilities need $500 million to $750 million per year to invest in infrastructure grid hardening. That's going to get rate-based. California has a goal to reach 100% clean energy at the state level. That is going to force us to go get essentially wind power from offshore or other states, which means we have to build transmission lines. Those transmission lines, the cost of infrastructure will be rate-based. These three forces will continue to increase rates in California. On top of that, we have both a demand and also a push for electrification, right? A lot of people who can afford it are interested in electrifying their vehicles, their ovens, their heat pumps. At the business level, there's regulation that's forcing public agencies to electrify their fleets, their medium heavy-duty trucks. So electricity load's going to go up, electricity costs going to go up. You look ahead to the end of this decade, I think we are headed towards an affordability crisis in California. which is already here. A meaningful number of California electricity ratepayers are behind on their electric bill. Those are not necessarily the people you hear the most about because they're the less heard of people in the society. But at my customer group level, public agencies I work with, you cannot have a conversation in their general business operation and have the issue of electricity affordability and how much is that going to cost us if we want to build this plant not come up. So my message to regulators, to what I could change in the state, if I had a magic wand, is you got to look at the KPIs of what's going to drive prosperity and growth in the state and work backwards as to what do we need to do differently so that we can enable growth here in California for us.
Well, I hope they're listening.
I hope so too. I mean, we definitely lobby, support. We are active at Sacramento at the legislature level, and there's a very novel thing. Again, why one of the reasons I love my job is that my customer groups, public agencies, they are cohorts and they work together to create change. And especially given that they're public, they get a good audience from the state. So it helps, but these are complicated matters. Passing a bill, making a change, it's not the stuff of weeks or months. It takes often years to get there, but good work is being done every day.
Very good. And now let me come to our last couple of questions. So firstly, is there anything that you want to plug to our audience who tend to be electrification folks around the world? Then this is your chance. And then I want to get straight to your contrarian view.
Sure. What do I want to plug? There's one thing I'd love to plug, if that's the opportunity. So one thing that we have created and made visible is the value of solar savings, which sounds very simple and it sounds like old news. But from the dawn of this industry, people have loved to forecast what solar can do for a building to save them money. But nobody really looks back in real time and say, hey, how much did solar actually saved me on my electric bill last month? That exercise is something that requires you to create a counterfactual bill, a counterfactual usage, a counterfactual actual bill, using the same tariffs or rules of the utility and the rate schedule, the rate numbers that they use. And it turns out it's quite a complicated calculation to do to create this counterfactual bill or shadow bill, people call it in the industry. So we have created a software called Solar Shadow API, and you can go check it out, solarshadowAPI.com, that helps enable you to answer that question of how much money did I bill on my utility bill last month because of solar, battery, linear generator, whatever you had behind the meter. And then it can also help you do scenario planning of what if I was on a different rate schedule? And it turns out this is something that utilities themselves try to do for their customers to help them, find better rate options. But funny enough, they can't do it as fast or as cleanly as the software that we have. And for us, that has been essentially the operating system of our company, where when somebody comes to us and they need help with operating solar or figuring out how to do more batteries or EV chargers or whatever, we start in there on Solar Shadow and we onboard them. We make a digital twin of all their buildings and their electric meters. We can recreate any bill from any utility in California and then get to doing good work now that we have the confidence of we know how much your electricity cost is or will be. So let's go do projects now with confidence. That's my plug for the episode.
So we'll put that in the show notes then, solarshadowAPI.com.
That's right.
Do have a look if you're interested in that. I always think that people have heard me say this many times before, but electricity billing is like rocket science. It is just so difficult to get right. And so much of big utilities and energy companies is billing. And yet there are so many mistakes. It is so often, it's just a perilous thing to be doing. It should just be adding up and taking away, right? How is that hard? Add up, take away, put some time bands on it. How should it be that hard? But it is. It's really, really hard to do.
It is very complex. Again, from the policy, the P of policy that we've put on physics, right? Because it should just be kilowatt hours times dollars, right? It's just physics and math, but there's policy involved in it. So you and the building next door, depending on what you're set up to do, you get a different value for that 15 minutes of electricity you used. And it's just mind-blowing. But that's what rate planning is. And you can listen to hours of episodes on various podcasts about this. It's an insane world.
All right, now for your contrarian view then. So, Ali, what do you believe that not a lot of other people believe?
Oh boy, I don't know if this is that contrarian, but I feel energy consumption in many areas, that especially in California, that we're involved in, is viewed as a negative thing. The word conservation is used a lot, and we gotta use less. And I believe the exact opposite. I feel we have to enable the culture, the mindset of being efficient with things, but promote life in a way that actually enables more need for electricity, more need for water, because that's what growth is about. And that's how you enable that. And fearing the lack of energy, lack of water is going to drive us towards doing things that will actually wind us down as a society, versus taking on the abundance mindset that, no, we can go produce water. We can desalinate water with cheap electricity, and we have the technology to go do it. In fact, other regions in the world have done it. Look at Israel. Like, they have a great handle on their water. They have contributed so much to water innovation. And, we started with solar. That was cool maybe 15 years ago, and then kind of fell out of favor because other cool technologies came. But I'm long on solar and all things that solar enables, like batteries, EV charging, electrification of homes and buildings. So my contrarian view is, innovation over scarcity, and especially innovating for abundance versus regulating for scarcity is a tagline that, I try to promote with, in the state of California. And I think good things will come our way if we take on that mindset and drive towards growth.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. Very much agree with you, especially on water plants in the Middle East. I mean, it's just amazing what you can do with seawater now when you're constrained by the weather. And yeah, I feel like the world's kind of waking up after a bit of a crazy party in the last half a decade, where the world moved towards thinking that it was all about doing less. And now I agree with you. A growth mindset, an abundance mindset is how you innovate out of many of the problems we have. I think, I hope. So, Ali, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. If you want to check out Ali's blog, you absolutely should go and do that. We're going to put the link in the show notes. And also, do go to solarshadowapi.com, where you can create a shadow bill and see the impacts of solar on your site. Is it just California, or do you do other places as well?
The software can scale to anywhere in the world, but we are focused on California.
All right. Coming to a region near you soon. And thanks, Ali, for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Q, thank you so much for the conversation.